Grimsdon by Deborah Abella. Chapter 13. A Murdering Madman. Meanwhile, far from the west, the wicked witch was sitting outside her castle, surveying her kingdom. She owned she had only one eye, but it was as powerful as a telescope. She could see everything in her kingdom. When she looked around, she spotted Dorothy and her friends. The wicked witch was very angry that they had dared to enter her kingdom. She blew hard on a silver whistle hanging around her neck, summoning a snarling pack of big grey wolves. They had long legs, fierce eyes, and extremely sharp teeth. "Go find those strangers and tear them apart," commanded the wicked witch. "Aren't you going to make them slaves the way you usually do?" asked the wolf pack's leader. "No," snapped the wicked witch. They would not make very good slaves. One is made of tin, one is made of straw, and the lion is a coward. That leaves a weak girl and her silly little dog. From The Wizard of Oz. "We're here!" Xavier jumped through the window. The twins leapt up from the lounge where they'd snuggled under a blanket with Fly. "What'd you bring back?" Xavier held out his hands and Isabella climbed in behind them. "Nothing." "Nothing? You've been gone for hours." Griffin lay the Wizard of Oz on the table. "We met someone." Xavier sat on the table and took an apple from the bowl. "You met someone?" Griffin asked Isabella. "Where?" "At the State Library. An adult." Xavier took another bite. "Who was he?" Xavier screwed up his face. "Not sure. Interesting guy to talk to." "You talked to him?" Griffin asked. "What if he were a murderer? What if he had a weapon?" "He did. He tried to attack us with a fish." "A fish?" Raffi asked. "That's silly," Bee laughed. "And a bit smelly," Xavier sniffed. "And what if he was an interesting man who cooked us great-tasting fish and knows a whole lot about what happened 3 years ago?" "What was his name?" Griffin asked. "He couldn't remember," Isabella said, "but he had an astrolabe." "An astrolabe? A real one?" "What's an astrolabe?" Raffi asked. "It's like an ancient computer used to predict the position of the sun and the planets and the floods," Xavier added, "along with some kind of ancient book." "What book?" Griffin asked. "The predictions," Isabella said. Raffi sank back into his seat. "So it really exists." Fly held up her notepad. "What is it?" "A book written by a philosopher called Galeotto over 1,000 years ago. The church and government accused him of challenging their authority and ordered the book to be destroyed. One man's whole life's work wiped out just because he suggested the world worked differently than we thought. They say he went mad after that. Philosophers for centuries have suspected secret copies existed." "It seems at least one does," Isabella smiled. "So maybe it was good we spoke to this murderous madman after all." Xavier finished his apple and slapped Griffin on the back. "He could still be a murderer." Griffin's eyebrows knotted. He's just a much more interesting potential murderer now." He said he was asked to write a report for the government, but they didn't like what he had to say, so they ignored him. Isabella's voice softened. "He said if they'd listened to him, they could have prevented the floods." An uneasy quiet seeped into the room. "But he also spoke to a stuffed bear," Xavier leant in. "So I wouldn't rush into believing everything he says. Now, I think there's just enough daylight left for a flying lesson. Who's interested?" "I am." Raffi sprang off his chair. "Looks like it's you, young man." "Can I come too?" Bee pleaded. Don't see why not. Maybe that's not a great... Griffin's words were trampled by the sounds of the twins racing to the rooftop. Fly closed her book with a scowl aimed at Xavier and went after them. They'll be safe, Griffman. Xavier winked at him. Trust me, I know what I'm doing. Griffin's eyes drilled into Xavier's back as he leapt up the stairs. He's reckless, Isabella, and that's going to get us into trouble one day. I know he's a bit mouthy. She looked over her shoulder to make sure the kids were gone. But he helped fight off men who tried to kidnap us. Kidnap you? When? Are you okay? She nodded. It was just a bit of a shock seeing 3 adults in one day. One had a card saying he was a government agent for a national resettlement program. Resettled out of Grimsdon? I think so, Isabella paused. What if the government could have stopped the floods like the old man said? We'd still be in school. You'd be brilliant and topping every class. We'd still go to the movies and the library and Mrs. Gray's bakery. Her voice cracked. It's getting more dangerous here. Sneaker waves, kidnapping agents, food is harder to find, and then there's Snedden and his men. Do you think it's time to go home? This is home. For how much longer? Griffin wanted to hug her, to do something to take away how sad she looked. He wanted to tell her it would be all right, that he'd protect her, that at least they had each other. As he began to lift his arms towards her, she stood up. We'd better go upstairs, or Ralphie will stay in that flying machine all night. Griffin quickly tucked his hands into his pockets and followed her upstairs.